adventurer on this first-rate adventurer,
Adventure. Pretty much Justin's entire dialogue and the experience of Grandia 1 wrapped all into one word. Hello guys, this is Callie and I am back as promised checking out this oldie but goodie called Grandia 1 that released back on the Sega Saturn, PlayStation 1 and most recently re-released as an HD collection with Grandia 1 and 2. And as a disclaimer, I'd like to say that Grandia 2 is one of my favorite JRPGs of all time. So you can only imagine my excitement when I had realized I had never played the first game in the series. I had always started with Grandia 2 growing up, and this was my first exposure to this awesome, amazing series. So I had very high expectations going into the first game. And going into this review, I'm going to be completely honest. I'm going to list a lot of pros. I'm going to list a few cons. So please stay along for the journey. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you enjoy JRPG reviews. And let's go ahead and jump into the review. The premise of the story is centered around Justin, an inspiring adventurer from Parm. He lives with his mother, Lily, in their home in the upstairs floor of their family-owned restaurant. Justin's father vanished years ago on an adventure, and his mother is worried that he will try to follow in the footsteps of her late husband. Yet Justin, a romanticist, insists that there are still uncharted parts of the world, despite general perception that the end of the world is out of reach. He is accompanied by his friend named Sue, and he ends up meeting a nice young lady by the name of Fina. First, I want to start with the game's visuals. The game looks visually pleasing. It has that classic 90s style JRPG look, 2.5D kind of thing going on. Not exactly as advanced as today's 2.5D standards, but the game is still visually pleasing to look at. The animation portraits are great, the animation is great, and the environments look really good, as well as the character sprites. So no complaints here on a visual level. I really do enjoy the game's graphics and the character's animation. And I really appreciate how the details and the graphics and the environment complements the game's grand sense of adventure. So everything works here on a visual level, as well as complementing the adventure that you are on with your party members. Now, in this same vein, one con that I have is some of the dungeon and town design. Sometimes getting around in this game and its map system was absolutely dated, and just to me it was frustrating at times. The dungeons require you to completely backtrack after you finish them, and honestly, with the way that this game's camera angle is, it made for some very frustrating backtracking when you have just finished a dungeon. So while I can compliment the game's grand sense of adventure and its environment complementing that, I did not have a good time leaving completing dungeons, leaving dungeons, going through towns, looking for the next town prompt or story prompt, going through the game's towns with this camera angle and these sort of dungeon designs were very frustrating, and sometimes it did take me out of the game. Now, moving on to this absolute star of this entire game, the combat system. This is one of the greatest combat systems I believe in JRPGs, and since a lot of JRPGs have tried to copy this sort of battle system, it has a timeline of when the opponents get to go and when your party gets to go, and the timeline works in variables. Sometimes the opponent goes a little faster, sometimes your character goes a little bit faster, and it all depends on certain contexts and variables that happens inside the battle, and it's real time in a sense, so it gives you a great sense of being active inside of the battle, and it has a great amount of detail and strategy added along with it. So this battle system, I can see how it laid the foundation for what would eventually become the staple of the Grandia battle system, and the battle system that I've come to love so much in Grandia 2. It was nice to see where its foundation was built. This battle system is absolutely phenomenal. And it also has magic, skills, abilities, different abilities to equip different weapons, which the different weapons will affect the different skills that you can use. And that's a feature that I didn't even see in Grandia 2. So I was very impressed with this game's battle system. I love how the characters can use different moves and they have different set of skills for different weapons. And that to me just adds a nice variety and depth to a combat system. This game's combat system was way ahead of its time, and for that it makes me almost want to forgive everything else that I found a little bit displeasing about this game. However, the battle system, 10 out of 10, excellent. And while it's not as complex as future games in the Grandia series, it was excellent to see where this series got its foundation from. Now moving back to the story, unfortunately I just was not as excited about Justin's adventure and journey as maybe I thought I should have been. Sometimes in the game's story I felt as though I was just playing it and I wasn't really engaged with the sense of adventure. For me, the stakes wasn't high enough, and I know a lot of people will disagree with me on that, and I'm probably going to receive a lot of dislikes, but a lot of folks like this game because of the sense of just Saturday morning cartoon adventure, lighthearted, and it didn't exactly involve the typical tropes of a JRPG. However, for me, I do like a little tension, I do like a little risk, and I just could not really get into Justin's sense of just wanting to be an adventurer, and sometimes it made the journey feel a little not as important. I just felt like I was going from town to town, going from dungeon to dungeon, and we're just on an adventure for the sake of being on an adventure. And I can see how that can be a good story point for certain people who just want to detox, but for me, like I just said before, I like a little risk, I like a little tension, and at certain times of the game I just was kind of disengaged with the story just because it was based on the sense of just going on an adventure. And while we're on the case of the story, the characters aren't exactly my favorite. I think Justin is an acceptable protagonist. I think Sue is honestly the best character in the game, and Fina is a refreshing heroine, but she just doesn't do it enough for me as well. And I may receive a lot of flack for this, but honestly guys, the characters weren't my favorite. Also, the characters that join you along the party, they come and they go and they come and they go, and just as you're getting used to a character, they leave your party in place for another character. I thought that Grandia 2 handled this much better, as the story made sense for why the characters would leave and come back. That also happens here, but it happens at such a frequent rate that you really can't connect with the characters the way that you should. But going back to a pro, this game's music is absolutely phenomenal. I love the musical score, I love the theme, and it works for this grand sense of adventure that the game tries to convey. Noriyuki Iwadare is one of my favorite video game composers of all time. We even talk on Facebook sometime. And he's an absolute stud. I love his work. I've loved every single game he's ever worked on, and he is nothing short of excellent in this game as well. So shout out to Noriyuki. I love your work. And the game's music is just phenomenal. It really fits the town's themes, and it fits the moment of what's happened. And one other thing that really bothered me during my time with this game was the mechanics in the UI and the inventory system. The way that the inventory system is completely dated. I believe each character could only have 12 items, and it was just a pain to go through because those items were locked on that character. There was no group item list, there was no group inventory. Each character had individual item slots of only 12, and it just made for some frustrating game design and choices, in my opinion. I have no idea why there wasn't a group inventory. However, it really bothered me when I couldn't just use an item from my party's inventory. Oh, just frustrating. However, wrapping all of this up, I will have to say, despite the cons, I can see why Grandia is such a revered JRPG, especially during the time that it came out. And despite everything I said, I was truly enjoying this game. I think up until I got to Gumball Village, I started to lose that grand sense of adventure that we had started the game with. So unfortunately for me, that's where my motivation started to wane. I did beat the game, however, I was not as motivated and not as excited as from when I started the game. However, the graphics are pleasing, the music is absolutely excellent, and the battle system is one of the best battle systems in JRPG history. While the characters aren't exactly my favorite, I can see how people fell in love with their Saturday morning light cartoon charm and their lighthearted, and just watching them grow as children on this adventure. I can easily see the charm of these characters, and while the dungeon and town design may be some of my most frustrating moments I've had in a JRPG, I can see why this game was so revered. So ultimately, I'm going to give Grandia 1 the CLASSIC review of 7.8. I believe this game is a 7.8. I believe it has aged okay. However, some dated design choices and the lack of me being truly interested in this story kept me from giving it any higher. So thank you guys for watching the review. If you would like to see my Grandia 2 review, now that game right there, that's a JRPG. However, please subscribe, like this video if you liked it, and let me know if you disagree or agree with this review. All voices are welcome here, and I'm very curious to see if you guys are willing to try this JRPG out or if it's one of your favorites. Be sure to let me know down in the comment section below. Callie will see you guys next time, and thank you for watching the video. Bye bye.